Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen, Force over here, and welcome back to another reading live stream. Tonight, I will at least try to finish, if not complete. I may or may not be able to, but I'll try to get at least halfway through the remaining chapters of the book that we've got left to read of Psycho by Robert Bloch. Uh, we are taking turns a bit between this book and Stevenson's Night Shift, so yeah, there we go. In any event, before we do that, hello Daniel Barry, how you doing tonight? Well, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get things started. So, without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and get right straight to it, and let's begin. Also, before I do read it, I want to let everybody know if you come in and you say something that I haven't, and I don't read it immediately, it's because I'm reading the book, but I will try to read every comment I can in between chapters, if not also paragraphs, depending on what's going on. But either way, let's begin. Chapter 10. Norman smiled at the elderly man and said, "Here's your key. That'll be $10 for the two of you, please." The elderly man's wife opened her purse. "I've got the money here, Homer." She placed a bill on the counter, nodding at Norman. Then she stopped nodding and her eyes narrowed. "What's the matter? Don't you feel good?" I'm just a little tired, I guess. Be alright. Going to close up now." "So early? I thought motels stayed open until all hours, particularly on Saturday nights." "We don't get much business here. Besides, it's almost 10. Almost 10. Nearly 4 hours. Oh my god. I see. Well, good night to you." "Good night." They were going out now, and he could step away from the counter. He could switch off the sign and close the office. But first he was going to take a drink. A big drink. Because he needed one. And it didn't matter whether he drank or not. Nothing mattered now. It was all over. All over, or just beginning. Norman had already taken several drinks. He took one as soon as he returned to the motel around 6, and he'd taken one every hour since then. If he hadn't, he would never have been able to we would never have been able to last. Never been able to stand here, knowing what was lying up there at the house, underneath the hall rug. That's where he'd left it, without trying to move anything. He just pulled the sides of the rug and tossed them over to cover it. There was quite a bit of blood, but it wouldn't soak through. Besides, there was nothing else he could do then, not in broad daylight. Now, of course, he'd have to go back. He'd given Mother strict orders not to touch anything, and he knew she'd obey. Funny, once it had happened, how she collapsed again. It seemed as if she'd nerve herself up to almost anything. The manic phase wasn't that what the manic phase. Wasn't that what they called it? But once it was over, she just wilted and he had to take over. He told her to go back to her room and not to show herself at the windows, just lie down until he got there. Then he had locked the door. But he'd have to unlock it now. Norman closed the office and went outside. There was the Buick, Mr. Arbogast's Buick, still parked up just where he had left it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if he could just climb into that car and drive away? Drive away from here, far away, and never come back again at all? Drive away from the motel, away from Mother, away from that thing lying under the rug in the hall? For a moment the temptation welled up, but only for a moment. Then it subsided, and Norman shrugged. It wouldn't work. He knew that much. He could never get far enough away to be safe. Besides, that thing was waiting for him. Waiting for him. So he glanced up and down the highway, and then he looked at number 1 and at number 3 to see if their blinds were drawn. And then he stepped into Mr. Arbogast's car and took out the keys he found in Mr. Arbogast's pocket. and he drove up to the house, very slowly. Hmm. I'm gonna do something real quick. Hold on. Hmm. Uh, what happened to my remote? Oh, there it is. All the lights were out. Mother was asleep in her room. Or maybe she was only pretending to be asleep. Norman didn't care, just so she stayed out of his way while he took care of this. He didn't want Mother around to make him feel like a little boy. He had a man's job to do. A grown man's job. It took a grown man just to bundle the rug together and look what was in it. Hold up a second. He got it down the steps and into the back seat of the car. And he'd been right about there not being any leaking. These old shag rugs were absorbent. When he got through the field and down to the swamp, he drove along the edge away until he came up to an open space. Wouldn't, wouldn't do to try and sink the car in the same place he'd put the other one, but this new spot was satisfactory, and he used the same method. It was really very easy, in a way. Practice makes perfect. Except that there was nothing to joke about, not while he sat there on the tree stump and waited for the car to go down. It was worse than the other time. You'd think because the Buick was a heavier car that it would sink faster, but it took a million years. Until at last, cop. I couldn't do the sound effect like I wanted to, so I'm just saying cop. There. It was gone forever. Like that girl and the $40,000. Where had it been? Not in her purse, certainly, and not in the suitcase. Maybe even in the overnight bag or somewhere in the car. He should have looked. That's what he should have done. Except that he'd been in no condition to search, even if he'd known the money was there. And if he had found it, no telling what might have happened. Most probably he would have given himself away when the detective came around. You always gave yourself away if you had a guilty conscience. That was one thing to be thankful for. He wasn't responsible for all of this. Oh, he knew all about being an accessory. On the other hand, excuse me, he had to protect Mother. It meant protecting himself as well, but it was really Mother he was thinking about. Norman walked back through the field slowly. Tomorrow he'd have to return with the car and the trailer, do it all over again. But that wasn't half as important as attending to another matter. Again, it was just a matter of watching over Mother. He thought it all through, and the facts just had to be faced. Somebody was going to come here and inquire about that detective. It just stood to reason, that's all. The company, something or other. Mutual that employed him wasn't going to let him disappear without an investigation. They probably had been in touch with him, or heard from him, all week long. And certainly the real estate firm would be interested. Everybody was interested in $40,000. So, sooner or later, there'd be a questions to answers. Might be several days, or even a week, the way it had been with that girl. But he knew what was coming, and this time he was going to be prepared. He had it all figured out. No matter who showed up, the story would be perfectly straight. He'd memorize it, rehearse it, so there'd be no slip of the tongue the way he had slipped tonight. Nobody was going to get him excited or confused, not if he knew in advance what to expect. Already he was planning just what to say when the time came. The girl had stayed at the motel, yes. He'd admit that right away. But of course he hadn't suspected anything while she was here. Not until Mr. Arbogast came, a week later. The girl had spent the night and driven away. There'd be no story about any conversation, and certainly nothing about eating together at the house. What he would say, though, is that he told everything to Mr. Arbogast, and the only part which seemed to interest him was when he mentioned that the girl had asked him how far it was from here to Chicago, and could she make it in a single day. That's what interested Mr. Arbogast. He and he thanked him very much, and climbed back into his car and driven off. Period. No, he had no idea where he was headed for. Mr. Arbogast hadn't said. He just drove off. What time had it been? A little after supper time, Saturday. There it was. Just a simple little statement of fact. No special details, nothing elaborate to arouse anyone's suspicions. A fugitive girl had passed this way and gone on. A week later, a detective followed her trail, asked for and received information, then departed. Sorry, mister, that's all I know about it. Norman knew he could tell it that way. Tell it calmly and easily this time, because he wouldn't have to worry about Mother. She wasn't going to be looking out of the window. In fact, she wasn't going to be in the house at all. Even if they came with one of those search warrants, they weren't going to find Mother. That would be the best protection of all. Protection for her, even more than for him. He'd made it up his mind on it. Excuse me. And he was going to see that it worked out. There was no sense in even waiting until tomorrow. Strange now that it was actually over. He still felt fully unconfident. It wasn't that like that the other time, when he'd gone to pieces and needed to know where Mother was then. No Mother was there. Now he needed to know she was not there, and he had the necessary gumption for once to tell her just that. So he marched upstairs in the dark and went straight to her room. He switched on the light. She was in bed, of course, but not asleep. She had she hadn't been sleeping at all. Just plain possum. Hello, the Thinker. How you doing tonight? Norman, where on earth have you been? I was so worried. You know where I've been, Mother. Don't pretend. Is everything all right? Certainly. He took a deep breath. Mother, I'm going to ask you to give up sleeping in your room for the next week or so. What's that? Hold up. Doing pretty good. How you doing? I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. What's that? I said I have to ask you not to sleep here for the next week or so. Are you out of your mind? This is my room. I know. And I'm not asking you to give it up permanently, only for a little while. But why on earth? Mother, please listen and try to understand. We had a visitor here today. Must you talk about that? I must, for a moment. Because sooner or later somebody will be around to inquire about after him, and I'll say he came and left. Of course that's what you'll say, son. That'll be the end of it. Perhaps. I hope so. But I can't take chances. Maybe they'll want to search the house. Let them. He won't be here. Neither will you. He gulped a breath and rushed on. I mean it, Mother. It's for your own protection. I can't afford to let anyone see you, like that detective did today. I don't want anyone to start asking you questions. You know why as well as I do. It's just impossible. So the safest thing for both of us is to make sure you're just not around. What are you going to do? Bury me in the swamp? Mother, she started to laugh. It was more like a cackle, and he knew that once she really got started, she wouldn't stop. The only way to stop her was to outshout her. A week ago, Norman would never have dared. But this wasn't a week ago. It was now. And things were different. It was now, and he had to face the truth. Mother was more than sick. She was psychotic, dangerously so. He had to control her, and he would. Shut up! He said, and the cackling ceased. I'm sorry, he said softly, but you must listen to me. I've got it all figured out. I'm going to take you down into the fruit cellar. The fruit cellar? Why? I can't. You can, and you will. You have to. I'll say to it that you're taken care of. There's a light, and I can put in a pot for you. I put in a cot for you, and I won't! I'm not asking you, Mother. I'm telling you. You're going to stay in the fruit cellar until I think it's safe for you to come upstairs again. And I'll hang that old Indian blanket on the wall so that it covers up the door. Nobody will notice a thing, even if they bother to go down into the cellar. It's the only way we can both be sure that you're going to be safe. Norman, I refuse to even discuss it any further with you. I'm not going to budge from this room. Then I'll have to carry you. Norman, you wouldn't dare! But he did. Finally, that's just what he did. He picked her up right off the bed and carried her, and she was light as a feather compared to Mr. Arbogast, and she smelled of perfume instead of stale cigarette smoke, the way he had. She was too astonished to put up a fight, but whimpered a little. Norman was startled at how easy it was, once he made up his mind to go through with it. Why, she was just a sick old lady, a frail, feeble thing. He didn't have to be afraid of her, not really. She was afraid of him now. Yes, she must be, because not once, all through this, had she called him son. I'll fix the cot for you, he told her. And there's a pot too. Norman, must you talk that way? For just an instant she flared up in the old way, then subsided. He bustled around, bringing blankets and arranging the curtains on the small window so that there'd be sufficient ventilation. She began whimpering again, not so much whimpering as muttering under her breath. It's like a prison cell. That's what it is. You're trying to make a prisoner out of me. You don't love me anymore, Norman. You don't love me, or else you wouldn't treat me this way. If I didn't love you, do you know where you'd be today? He didn't want to say it, but he had to. The state hospital for the criminally insane. That's where you'd be. He snapped out the light, wondering if she'd heard him, wondering if his words had gotten through to her, even if she had. Apparently she understood, because just as he closed the door, she answered. Her voice was deceptively soft in the darkness, but somehow the words cut into him more deeply than the straight razor had cut into Mr. Arbogast's throat. Yes, Norman, I suppose you're right. That's where I'd probably be. But I wouldn't be there alone. Norman slammed the door, locked it, and turned away. He wasn't quite sure, but as he ran up the cellar steps, he thought he could still hear her chuckling gently in the dark. Chapter 11. Sam and Lilo sat in the back room of the store, waiting for Arbogast to arrive, but all they heard were the sounds of Saturday night. You can tell when it's Saturday night in a town like this, Sam commented. The noises are different. Take the traffic for one thing. There's more of it, and it moves faster. That's because Saturday is the evening when the teenagers get the cars. And all that rattling and squealing you hear, that's parking. Farm families and their old jalopies coming in to see the show. Hired hands in a hurry to head for the taverns. Notice the footsteps? They're different too. Hear that running? The kids are loose. Saturday Saturday's the night they stay up late. No homework. He shrugged. Of course, I suppose it's a lot more noisy in Fort Worth on any night of the week. I suppose so, Lila said. Then, Sam, why doesn't he get here? It's almost time. You must be hungry. It isn't that. But why doesn't he come? Maybe he's tied up. Maybe he found out something important. He could at least call. He knows how worried we are. Just be patient a little while longer. I'm sick of waiting! Lila stood up, pushing back her chair. She began to pace back and forth across the narrow room. I never should have waited in the first place. I should have gone straight to the police. Wait, wait, wait. That's all I've heard. All week long! First Mr. Lowry, then Arbogast, and now you. Because you're all thinking about the money, not about my sister. Nobody cares about what happens to Mary. Nobody but me. That's not true. You know how I feel about her. Then how can you stand it? Why don't you do something? What kind of a man are you, sitting here and handing out Cracker Barrel philosophy at a time like this? She grasped her purse and pushed past him. Where are you going? Sam asked. To see that sheriff of yours right now. It would be just as easy to call him. After all, we want to be here when Arbogast shows up. If he shows up, maybe he's left town for good. If he's found something, he wouldn't have to come back. Lila's voice teetered along a thin, hysterical edge. Sam took her arm. Sit down, he said. I'll phone the sheriff. She made no attempt to follow him as he walked out into the store. He went over to the rear counter and stood next to the cash register and picked up the receiver. 162, please. Hello, Sheriff's Office? This is Sam Loomis, over at the hardware store. I'd like to speak to Sheriff Chambers. He's what? No, I hadn't heard anything about it. Where did you say? Fulton? When do you suppose he'll be back? I see. No, nothing wrong. I just wanted to talk to him. Look, if he gets in any time before midnight, would you ask him to call me here at the store? I'll be here all night. Yes. Thanks. I'd appreciate that. Sam hung up and walked back into the rear room. What did he say? He wasn't there. Sam reported to the conversation, watching her face as he spoke. Seems somebody robbed a bank over at Fulton around supper time this evening. Chambers and the whole state highway patrol gang are out setting up roadblocks. That's what all the excitement's about. I talked to old Peterson. He's the only one left in the sheriff's office. There's two cops walking the beat here in town, but they wouldn't be able to use us, be any use to us. So now what are you going to do? Why wait, of course. Chances are we won't be able to talk to the sheriff until tomorrow morning. But don't you even care what happens to? Of course I care. You cut in on her sharply, deliberately. Would it ease your mind any if I called the motel and found out what's holding Arbogast up? She nodded. Again he went back into the store. This time she accompanied him and stood waiting while he asked the operator for information. She finally located the name, Norman Bates, and found the number. Sam waited while she put the call through. Funny, he said, hanging up. Nobody answers. Then I'm going out there. No, you're not. He put his hand on her shoulder. I'm going out. You wait right here in case Arbogast comes in. Sam, what do you think happened? I'll tell you when I get back. Now you just relax. It shouldn't take me more than 3/4 of an hour. Hmm. And it didn't because Sam drove fast. In exactly 42 minutes, he unlocked the front door, came into the store again. Lila was waiting for him. Well? She asked. Funny, the place was closed up. No lights in the office, no lights in the house behind the motel. I went up there and banged on the door for 5 minutes straight and nothing happened. The garage next to the house was open and empty. Looks like the Spades went away for the evening. What about Mr. Arbuthnot? His car wasn't there. There's two parked down at the motel. I looked at the licenses. Alabama and Illinois. But the way I figure it, Sam said, is that Arbuthnot did find out about something. Maybe something important. It could be that he and Bates both went off together, and that's why we haven't gotten any word. Sam, I can't take much more of this. I've got to know! You've got to eat too. He displayed a bulging paper bag. Stopped in at the drive-in on my way back. Brought us some hamburgers and coffee. Let's take the stuff in the back room. By the time they finished eating, it was after 11. Look, Sam said, why don't you go back to the hotel and get some rest? If anyone calls or comes in, I'll phone you. No sense in us both sitting around like this. But, come on. Worrying isn't going to help. Chances are I figured it right. Arbuthnot has located Mary and will get news by morning. Good news. But there was no good news on Sunday morning. By 9 o'clock, Lila was rattling the front door of the hardware store. Hear anything? She asked, and when Sam shook his head, she frowned. Well, I found out something. Arbuthnot checked out over at the hotel yesterday morning, before he even started to look around. Sam didn't say anything. He picked up his hat and walked out of the store with her. The streets of Fairvale were empty on Sunday morning. The courthouse was set back in a square on Main Street, surrounded by a lawn on all four sides. One side contained a statue of a Civil War veteran, the kind cast up by the thousands back in the 80s to occupy courthouse lawns all over the country. The other three sides displayed respectively a Spanish-American war trench mortar, a World War I cannon, and a granite shaft bearing the names of 14 Fairvale citizens who had died in World War II. Benches lined the sidewalks all around the square, but they were vacant at this hour. The courthouse was closed, but the sheriff's office was over at Annex. Fairvale citizens still spoke of it as the new Annex, though it had been added back in 1946. The side door was open. They entered, climbed the stairs, walked down the hall to the office. Old Peterson was doing duty at the outer desk all alone. Morning, morning, Sam. Good morning, Sheriff around? Nope. Hear about, hear about them bank robbers? Busted right through the roadblock down at Parnassus. FBI's after him now. Sent an alert. Where is he? Well, we got him pretty late last night. Early this morning, I should say. Did you give him my message? The old man hesitated. I guess I forgot. All this excitement around here. He wiped his mouth. Of course, I intended to today when he comes in. What time will that be? Right after lunch, I guess. Sunday morning sees over to the church. What church? First Baptist. Thanks. You wouldn't go pulling him out of... Sam turned away without answering. Lila's high heels clattered hollowly beside him in the hall. What kind of a hick town is this anyway? She murmured. A bank is held up and the sheriff is in church. What's he doing, praying that somebody will catch the robbers for him? Sam didn't answer. When they reached the street, she turned to him again. Where are we going now? First Baptist Church, of course. But it turned out that they didn't have to interrupt Sheriff Chambers at his devotions. As they turned down the side street, it was apparent that the services had just ended. People were beginning to emerge from the steepled structure. There he is, Sam muttered. come on. He led her over to a couple who stood near the curbing. The woman was a short, gray-haired nonentity in a mail-order pin print dress. The man was tall, broad across the shoulders, and, paunchily protruding at the waistline. He wore a blue serge suit, and his red seamed neck twisted in rebellion against the restraint of a white starched collar. He had curly braided hair and curly black eyebrows. Hold on a minute, Sheriff, said Sam. I'd like to talk to you. Sam Lewis, how are you? Sheriff Chambers held out a large red hand. Ma, you know Sam here. I'd like you to meet Miss. I'd like you to meet Lila Crane. Miss Crane is visiting here from Fort Worth. Pleased to meet you. Say, you aren't the one old Sam keeps talking about, are you? Never let on you were so pretty. It's my sister you're thinking of, Lila told him. That's why we're here to see you. I wonder if we could go over to your office for a minute, Sam broke in. Then we could explain the situation. Sure, why not? Judge Chambers turned to his wife. Ma, why don't you take the car and go along home? I'll be over in a little while, soon as I finish with these folks. But it wasn't a little while. Once settled in Sheriff Chambers' office, Sam told his story. Even without interruptions, that took a good 20 minutes. The sheriff interrupted frequently. Now let me get this straight here, he said at the conclusion. This fella who came to see you, this Arbogast, why didn't he check with me? I already explained that. He was hoping to avoid going to the authorities. His idea was to try and find Miss Crane and recover the money without any embarrassment to the Lowry agency. You say he showed you his credentials? Yes, Lila nodded. He was a licensed investigator for the insurance firm, and he managed to trace my sister all the way up here to that motel. That's why we're so worried now, because he never came back the way he said he would. But he wasn't at the motel when you drove out there? The question was addressed to Sam, and he answered it. There was nobody out there at all, Sheriff. That's funny. Damned funny. I know this fella Bates who runs it. He's always out there. Scarcely even leaves for an hour to come into town. You tried calling him this morning? Why don't you let me do that now? Probably turned out he was sound asleep when you got there last night. The big red hand picked up the phone. Don't tell him anything about the money, Sam said. Just ask for Arbogast and see what he has to say. Sheriff Chambers nodded. Leave it to me, he murmured. He murmured, I know how to handle this. He put through the call and they waited. Hello. Bates, that you? It's the Sheriff Chambers. That's right. I'm looking for a little information. Party here in town is trying to locate a fellow by the name of Arbogast. Milton Arbogast from Fort Worth. He's a special investigator or something for a firm called Parity Mutual. He's what? Oh, he did? When was that? I see. What do you have to say? It's alright, you can tell me. I already know all about it. Yeah. What's that again? Yeah. Yeah. And then he left, eh? Did he say where he was going? Oh, you think so? Sure. No, that's all. No, there's no trouble, just thought he might check in there. Say, while I've got you, you don't think you might have stopped back later on in the evening, do you? What time do you generally go to bed out there? Oh, I see. I guess that just about covers it then. Thanks for the information, mates. He hung up and swiveled around to face them. Looks like your man headed for Chicago, he said. Chicago? Sheriff Chambers nodded. Sure. That's where the girl said she was going. your friend Arbogast sounds like a pretty smooth operator to me. What do you mean? What did that mean? What did that man Bates tell you just now? Lila leaned forward. The same thing Arbogast told you yesterday evening when he called in from there. Your sister stayed at the motel last Saturday, but she didn't register under her own name. Called herself Jane Wilson and said she was from San Antonio. Let it slip that she was on her way to Chicago. It couldn't have been Mary then. Why, she doesn't know anyone in Chicago. She's never been there in her life. According to Bates, Arbogast was certain this was the girl. He even checked her handwriting. Your description, the car, everything fitted. Not only that, once he heard about Chicago, says he took off from there like a bat out of hell. But that's ridiculous. She has a weak start, if she was going there at all, that is. And he'd never find her in Chicago. Maybe he knew where to look. Maybe he didn't tell you to all he'd found out about your sister and her plans. What else could he know that we don't? Never can tell about these smart operators. Could be he had some idea of just what your sister was up to. If he could get to her and lay his hands on that money, you might not be so interested in reporting back to his company again. Are you trying to say that Mr. Arbogast was a crook? All I'm saying is that 40,000 in cash is a lot of money, and if Arbogast didn't show up here again, it means he had something to figure it out. The sheriff nodded. Must have been working the angles all along, the way it looks to me. Else why wouldn't he at least stop in here beforehand and see if I could help? You say he already checked out the hotel yesterday. Now wait a minute, Sheriff, Sam said. You're jumping to conclusions. You got nothing to go by except what this man Bates said over the phone just now. Couldn't he be lying? Why should he? He told a straight story. Said the girl had been there and said Abbott Arbogast was there. Where was he last night when I came then? Fast asleep in bed, just like I thought. The sheriff answered. Look here, I know this fellow Bates. He's kind of an odd one in his way. Not too bright, or at least that's how he always struck me. But he certainly isn't the type who'd ever pull off any fast ones. Why shouldn't I believe him? Particularly when I know your friend Armagnac was lying. Lying? About what? You told me what he said when he called you from the motel last night. Well, that was just a stall. You must have already found out about Chicago when he wanted to keep you quiet long enough for him to get a good head start. That's where he lied. I don't understand, Sheriff. Just what did he lie about? Why, when he said he was going up to see Norman Bates's mother. Norman Bates has no mother. He hasn't? Not for the last 20 years he hadn't. He hasn't. She's dead. Sheriff Chambers nodded. Quite a scandal around these parts. Surprised you don't remember it, but you were only a kid then. She built this motel with a fellow name of Considine, Joe Considine. She was a widow. She was a widow, understand. And the talk was that she and Considine were. The sheriff stared at Lila, then broke off with an aimless wave of the hand. Anyway, they never did get married. Something must have went wrong. Maybe she was in a family way. Maybe Considine had a wife back where he came from. But one night they both took uh, stri- stri- strychnine strychnine together. Regular poison pact, you might say. Their son, this Norman Bates, he found them both. This was pretty much of a shock. The way I remember it, he was laid up in the hospital for a couple of months after. Didn't even go to the funeral. But I went. That's how I'm sure his mother was dead. Hell, I was one of the pallbearers. Hmm. Chapter 12. Sean and Lila had dinner. Well, actually, I'm gonna take a bit of a break real quick. I just realized I'm feeling a little bit tired. I'm gonna get me something to drink real quick. I will be right back. One. All right. All right. I have returned. Okay. All right. Let's get back to the reading. Oh yeah. By the way, actually, I'm gonna do this real quick here before I do read because I do want to show a few books, two particular books that will indeed be coming soon. Uh, with my reading streams. Let me go ahead and get them real quick here. So I'll have to put them back exactly how I got them. As long as I don't. Alright, there's that. Alright. So I got the two books here that I want to show that I'm going to be reading here soon. So that way I don't put them with this massive amount of books I got right here behind me. So, yeah. Yep, because I do plan on reading all these books. Well, I do got these two books that I also want to read so much because I've had my eye on these two books as well as other books in particular, but these two books mainly because one involves a manga series that I've watched the anime version of that I am such a fan of, and the other one involves a novel timeline of a franchise that started all the way back in the 1970s. I'll let you guys think about what the two of them are. All right, but anyway, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 12. I don't know if this will be the final chapter I read or not, but if I do, then we would be let's see. So after I read this, if I were to finish reading chapter 12, I'll probably read chapter 13 too, since 12 isn't that long. So I'll probably read chapter 12 and 13, and that would leave with 14. Should leave me with four chapters left to go in this book. Yep, that would leave me with four chapters left, 14 through 17. So I'll go ahead and read through chapter 12 and 13, and then that will be the end of this reading stream. And 14 through 17 will be the final part of reading Psycho, which means I will still be reading Night Shift before I read the final part of Psycho, so that way they both get a turn, you know. And then after that, I'll be choosing the next four books that will be handpicked. I'll go ahead and do a poll. I'll go ahead and do a poll for these books. Uh, That way, that way when I get done with, that way that gives, the plenty of time for people to choose which of these four books they would like for me to, read. In any event, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 12 and then 13. Chapter 12. Sam and Lila had dinner over at the hotel. It was not an enjoyable meal for either of them. I still can't believe Mr. Arbogast would go off without a word to us, Lila said, putting down her coffee cup. And I can't believe Mary would go to Chicago either. Well, Sheriff Chamber believes it, Sam sighed. And you've got to admit, Arbogast lied to me about seeing Bates' mother. Yes, I know. It doesn't make sense. On the other hand, neither does the story about Chicago. Mr. Arbogast didn't know any more about Mary than we could tell him. Sam set his dessert spoon down next to the sherbet cup. I'm beginning to wonder how much of any of us really knows about Mary, he said. I'm engaged to her. You lived with her. None of us could believe she'd take that money, and yet there's no other answer. She did take it. Yes, Lila's voice was low. I believe that now. She took the money, but she wouldn't do it for herself. Maybe she thought she could help you. Maybe she wanted to bring it to help pay off your debts. Then why didn't she come to me? I wouldn't have accepted anything from her, even if I didn't know the money was stolen. But if she believed I might, then why didn't she come? She did. At least she got as far as at that motel. Lila crumpled her napkin, held it wadded tightly in her hand. That's what I was trying to tell the sheriff. We know she got as far as the motel, and just because Arbogast lied, that's no reason why this man Bates can't be lying too. Why doesn't the sheriff at least go out there and take a look around for himself instead of just talking to him on the phone? I don't blame Sheriff Chambers for refusing, Sam told her. How could he go any further? On what grounds? What evidence? What is he supposed to be looking for? You can't just go breaking in on people for no reason. Besides, they don't operate that way in a small town. Everybody knows everybody else. Nobody wants to stir up trouble or cause unnecessary hard feelings. You heard what he said. There's nothing to make anyone suspect Bates. He's known him all his life. Yes, and I've known Mary all my life. But there were some things about her I didn't suspect either. He admitted this man was a little peculiar. He didn't go that far. He said he was sort of a recluse. That's understandable when you think of what a shock it must have been to him when his mother died. His mother, Lila frowned. It's the one thing I can't get through my head. If Arbogast wanted to lie, why should he lie about a thing like that? I don't know. Maybe it was just the first thing in fact, if he was planning to run off, then why did he bother to call up at all? Wouldn't it have been simpler to just leave without our even knowing he'd actually been to that motel? She let go of the napkin and stared at Sam. I, I'm beginning to get an idea. What's up? Sam, just what did Arbogast say there at last when he called you? At the last, when he called you about seeing Bates' mother? He said that he'd noticed her sitting at the bedroom window when he drove in. Maybe he wasn't lying, but he had to be. Mrs. Bates is dead. You heard what the sheriff said. Maybe it was Bates who lied. Maybe Arbogast merely assumed that the woman was Bates' mother, and when he spoke of it, Bates said yes. He said she was sick, and nobody could see her, but Arbogast insisted. Isn't that what he told you? That's right, but I still don't see. No, you don't. But Arbogast did. The point is, he saw somebody sitting in the window when he drove in. And maybe that somebody was Mary. Lila, you don't think that. I don't know what to think. But why not? The trail ends there at the motel. Two people are missing. Isn't that enough? Isn't that enough for me, as Mary's sister, to go to the sheriff and insist that he make a thorough investigation? Come on, Sam said. Let's get going. They found Sheriff Chambers at his house, finishing dinner. He chewed on a toothpick while he listened to Lila's story. I don't know, he said. You'd have to be the one to sign the complaint. I'll sign anything you want, just so you go out there and look around. Couldn't we wait until tomorrow morning? I mean, I'm expecting to learn about those bank robbers and all, and... Now just a minute, Sam said. This is a serious business, Sheriff. This girl's sister's been missing for over a week now. It isn't just a matter of money anymore. For all we know, her life could be in danger. She could even be... Alright! You don't have to tell me about business, Sam. Come on, let's go over to the office and I'll let her sign. But if you ask me, it's a waste of time. Norman Bates is no murderer. Before we continue, I just want to add this little bit. It doesn't matter what a person acts like or looks like. None of that fucking shit matters. It's a matter of if he did actually do the crime. We, as the reader, because we're watching this and then later we know of it, we know that he committed the crime. But the characters don't know that. For all they know, anything could be happening, but Lila is a little bit on the right track. The only problem is, well, of course, she doesn't know who this woman by the window is, and she's assuming it's Mary. We know that part, at least, is incorrect. Outside of some of her other things, but that was the most important part that she got incorrect. Anyway, the word emerged just like any other word and died away, but its echo lingered. Sam heard it and Lila heard it. It stayed with them as they drove over to the courthouse annex with Sheriff Chambers. It stayed with them after the sheriff drove away, out to the motel. He'd refused to take either of them along, told them to wait. So they waited in the office. Just the two of them. The two of them. And the word. It was late afternoon when he returned. He came in alone, giving them a look in which disgust and relief were equally compounded. Just what I told you, he said. False alarm. What did you... Hold your horses, young lady. Give me a chance to sit down. I'll tell you about it. Went straight out there and didn't run into any trouble at all. Bates, he was down in the woods behind the house, getting him some kindling. I never even had to show the warrant. He was nice as pie. Told me to go look around for myself, even gave me the keys to the motel. And did you look? Of course I did. I went into every unit of the motel and I covered that house of his from top to bottom. Didn't find a soul. Didn't find anything. Because there's nobody there. Nobody's been there except Bates. He's lived alone all these years. Hmm. What about the bedroom? There's a bedroom up front on the second floor, all right, and it used to be his mother's when she was alive. That part's straight enough. In fact, he even kept it the way it was. Says he has no other use for it, seeing as how he's got the whole house to himself. Guess he's kind of an odd one, that Bates, but who wouldn't be living alone like that all these years? Did you ask him about what Arbogast told me? Wait, no, that's Sam. Hold on. Did you ask him about what Arbogast told me? Sam murmured. About seeing his mother when he drove in and all that? Sure, right away. He says it's a lie. Arbogast never even mentioned seeing anyone. I talked kind of rough to him at first, on purpose, just to see if there was something he was holding back on, but his story made sense. I asked him about this Chicago business again, too, and I still think that's the real answer. I can't believe it, Lila said. Why would Mr. Arbogast make up that unnecessary excuse about seeing Bates' mother? You'll have to ask him next time you see him, Sheriff Chambers told her. Maybe he saw her ghost sitting in the window. You're sure his mother is dead? I already told you I was there at the funeral. I saw the note she left for Bates when she and this Considine fella killed themselves. What more do you want? Do I have to dig her up and show her to you? Chambers sighed. I'm sorry, miss. Didn't mean to fly off that way, but I've done all I can. I searched the house. Your sister isn't there. This man Arbogast isn't there. Didn't find a trace of their cars either. Seems to me this answer's pretty plain. Anyway, I've done all I can. Hmm. What would you advise me to do now? Why, check with this fellow Arbogast's home office. See if they know anything. Maybe they've got some lead on this Chicago angle. Don't suppose you can contact anyone until tomorrow morning, though. I guess you're right. Lila stood up. Well, thank you for all your trouble. I'm sorry to be such a bother. That's what I'm here for. Right, Sam? Right, Sam answered. Sheriff Chambers stood up. I know how you feel about this, miss, he said. I wish I could have been more of a help to you, but there's just nothing solid for me to go on. If you only had some kind of real evidence now, then maybe we understand, Sam said. And we both appreciate your cooperation. He turned to Lila. Shall we go now? You looked into this Chicago business. Wait. You looked into this Chicago business, the big man called after them. So long now. Then they were on the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun cast slanting shadows. As they stood there, black tip of the Civil War veteran's bayonet raised to Lila's throat. Want to come back to my place? Sam suggested. The girl shook her head. The hotel? No. Where would you like to go then? I don't know about you, Lila said, but I'm going out to that motel. She raised her face defiantly, and the sharp shadow line slashed across her neck. For a moment it looked as though somebody had just cut off Lila's head. Figuratively speaking, of course. Chapter 13. Norman knew they were coming, even before he saw them driving in. He didn't know who they'd be, or what they'd look like, or even how many of them would come, but he knew they were coming. He had known it ever since last night when he lay in bed and listened to the stranger pound on the door. He had stayed very quiet, not even getting up to peep through the upstairs window. In fact, he'd even put his head under the covers while he waited for the stranger to go away. Finally, he did leave. It's lucky that Mother was locked up in the fruit cellar. Lucky for him, lucky for her, lucky for the stranger. But he'd known then that this wouldn't be the end of it, and it wasn't. This afternoon, when he was down at the swamp again cleaning up, Sheriff Chambers had driven in. It gave Norman quite a start, seeing the sheriff again, after all these years. He remembered him very well, from the time of the nightmare. That's the way Norman always thought about Uncle Joe Considine, and the poison and everything. It had been a long, long nightmare from the moment he phoned the sheriff until months afterward, when they let him out of the hospital to come back here, to the house once more. Seeing Sheriff Chambers now was like having the same nightmare all over, but people do have the same nightmare again and again. And the important thing to remember was that Norman had fooled the sheriff the first time, when everything had been made much harder. This time it should be even easier, if he remembered to be calm. It should be, and it was. He answered all the questions. He gave the sheriff the keys. He let him search the house alone. That was even funny in a way. letting the sheriff go up to the house and search while Norman stayed down at the edge of the swamp and finished something out of all the footprints. It was funny, that is, as long as Mother kept quiet. If she thought Norman was down there in the cellar, if she cried out or made a sound, then there'd be real trouble. But she wouldn't do that. She had been warned. And besides, the sheriff wasn't even looking for Mother. He thought she was dead and buried. How he'd fooled him the first time. Yes, and he fooled him just as easily again, because the sheriff came back and he hadn't noticed a thing. He asked Norman some more questions about the girl in Arbogast and going to Chicago. Norman was tempted to invent a little more, maybe even say that the girl had mentioned staying at a certain hotel up there, but on the second thought he realized it wouldn't be wise. It was better to just stick with what he'd already made up. The sheriff believed that. He almost apologized before he went away. So that part was settled, but Norman knew there'd be more. Sheriff Chambers hadn't come out here just on his own initiative. He wasn't following up on any hunch. He couldn't be, because he hadn't known anything. His phone call yesterday was the tip-off. It meant somebody else knew about Arbogast and the Burl. They got Sheriff Chambers to call. They sent the stranger out here last night to snoop. They sent the sheriff out today, and the next step would be to come out themselves. It was inevitable. Inevitable. When Norman thought about that, his heart started up again. He wanted to do all sorts of crazy things. Run away, go down into the cellar, and put his head in Mother's lap. Go upstairs and pull the covers back over his head. But none of this would help. He couldn't run away and leave Mother, and he couldn't risk taking her with him. Now, not in her condition. He couldn't even go to her for comfort or advice. Up until last week, that's just what he would have done. But he didn't trust her anymore. Couldn't trust her after what had happened. And pulling the covers over his head wouldn't help. If they claimed her again, he'd have to face them. That was the only sensible solution. Just face them. Stick to his story and nothing would happen. But meanwhile, he had to do something about the way his heart pounded. He sat there in the office, all alone. Alabama had pulled out early this morning, and Illinois had left right after lunch. There were no new customers. It was beginning to cloud up again, and if the storm came, he needn't expect any business this evening. So one drink wouldn't hurt, not if it made his heart calm down again. Norman found a bottle in the cubby hole under the counter. It was the second bottle of the three he'd put there over a month ago. That wasn't bad, just the second bottle. Drinking the first one had gotten him into all this trouble, but it wouldn't happen that way again. Not now, when he could be sure Mother was safely out of the way. In a little while, when it got dark, he'd seen about fixing some dinner. Maybe tonight they could talk. But right now, he needed this drink. These drinks. The first didn't really help, but the second did the trick. He was quite relaxed now. Quite relaxed. He could even take a third one if he wanted to. And then he wanted to very much because he saw the car drive in. It had nothing to distinguish it from any other car. No out of state license or anything like that. But Norman knew right away that they were here. When you're a psychic sensitive, you can feel the vibrations. And you can feel your heart pound. So you gulp the drink and watch them get out of the car. The man was ordinary looking, and for a moment Norman wondered if he hadn't made a mistake. But then he saw the girl. He saw the girl and he tilted the bottle up. Tilted it up to take a hasty swallow and to hide her face at the same time. Because it was the girl. She'd come back. Out of the swamp. No. No, she couldn't. That wasn't the answer. It couldn't be. Look at her again. Now in the light. Her hair wasn't the same color at all, really. It was brownish blonde. And she wasn't as heavy. But she looked enough like the girl to be her sister. Yes, of course. It must be who she was. And it explained everything. This Jane Wilson, or whatever her real name was, had run away with that money. The detective came after her, and now her sister. That was the answer. He knew what Mother would do in a case like this, but thank God he'd never have to run that risk again. All he had to do was stick to his story, and they'd go away. Just remember nobody could find anything. Nobody could prove anything. And there was nothing to worry about, now that he knew what to expect. The liquor had helped. It helped him to stand patiently behind the counter while he waited for them to come in. He could see them talking together outside the office, and that didn't bother him. He could see the dark clouds coming on out of the west, and that didn't bother him either. He saw the sky darken as the sun surrendered its splendor. The sun surrendered its splendor. Why it was like poetry. It, why it was like poetry. He was a poet. Norman smiled. He was many things, if they only knew. But they didn't know, and they wouldn't know. And right now he was just a fat, middle-aged motel proprietor who blinked up at the pair of them as they came in and said, "Can I help you?" The man came up to the counter. Norman braced himself for the first question, then blinked again when the man didn't ask it. Instead, he was saying, "Could we have a room, please?" Norman nodded, unable to answer. Uh-oh. Oh, well, actually, my PlayStation 5 is muted, so... Or not my PlayStation 5, my TV is muted, so it don't even matter. Norman nodded, unable to respond. Had he made a mistake? But no. Now the girl was stepping forward, and she was the sister. No doubt about it. Yes, would you like to? No, that's not necessary. Branches to fit on into some clean clothes. It was a lie. Their clothing was fresh, but Norman smiled. All right, it's $10, double. If you just sign here and pay me now. He pushed the register forward. The man hesitated for a moment, then scribbled. Norman had long practice when it came to reading names upside down. Mr. and Mrs. Sam Wright, Independence, Independence, Missouri. If I remember right, I think MO is Missouri. It could be in. I believe it is Missouri because I think. Was I? Please here. See, Maine is ME. Maryland is MD. Massachusetts is MA. Michigan is MI. Minnesota is MN. Mississippi is MS. Missouri is MO, I believe. Montana is MT. Yeah, so it would be Missouri. Okay. How did I figure that out on my own? I was actually thinking of this song from my childhood titled 15 Nifty United States. And at one part of the song, you would have to, you basically would say all 50 states in alphabetical order. So I had to think about all the states with the letter M starting it. And I had to think, well, I think it's this is, with the initials. I think I got it right. Yeah. Anyway, that was another lie. Right was wrong. Filthy, stupid liars. They thought they were so clever coming in here and trying to pull their tricks on him. Well, they'd see. The girl was staring at the register now. Not at the name the man had written, but at another one. Up on top of the page. Her sister's name. Jane Wilson, or whatever it was. She didn't think he'd notice when she squeezed the man's arm, but he did. I'll give you number one, Norman said. Where's that? The girl asked. Down at the end. How about number six? Number six. Norman remembered now. He'd written it down, as he always did after each signature. Number 6 had been the room he'd given the sister, of course. She'd noticed that. Number 6 is up at this end, he said. But you wouldn't want that. The fan's broken. Oh, we won't need a fan. Storm's coming up. It'll cool off in a hurry. Higher. Besides, 6 is our lucky number. We were married on the 6th of this month. Dirty, filthy liar. Norman shrugged. All right, he said. And it was all right. Now that he thought it over, it was even better than all right. Because if that's the way the liars were going to play it, if they weren't going to come out with any questions, but just sneak around, then number 6 was ideal. He didn't have to worry about them finding anything in there, and he could keep an eye on them. Yes, he could keep an eye on them. Perfect. So he took the keys and he escorted them next door to number 6. It was only a few steps, but already the wind had come up, and it felt chilly there in the twilight. He unlocked the unit while the man brought out a bag. One ridiculous little bag, all the way from Independence. Nasty, rotten liars. He opened the door and they stepped in. Would there be anything else? He asked. No, we're all right now. Thank you. Norman closed the door. He went back to the office and took another drink. A congratulatory drink. This was going to be even easier than he had dreamed. It was going to be easy as pie. I'm gonna go ahead and take a little drink real quick. Give me a second. Never say no to good milk. Good old fashioned milk. Anyway, excuse me. Then he tilted the license in its frame and started through the crack into the bathroom of number 6. They weren't occupying it, of course. They were in the bedroom beyond. But he could hear them moving around. And once in a while he caught muffled phrases of their conversation. The two of them were searching for something. What it was, he couldn't imagine. Judging from what he overheard, they weren't even sure themselves. Help if we knew what we were looking for, the man's voice. And then the girls. Anything happened, there'd be something we overlooked. I'm sure of it. Crime laboratories you read about. Always little clues. Man's voice. Man's voice again. But we're not detectives. I still think better to talk to him. Come right out. Frighten him into admitting. The woman smiled. They weren't going to frighten him into anything, any more than they were going to find anything. He'd been over that room thoroughly, from top to bottom. There was no telltale signs of what had happened. Not the tiniest stain of blood, not a single hair. Her voice coming closer now. You understand? If we only could find something to go on, then we'd be able to scare him so that he'd talk. She was walking into the bathroom now, and he was following her. With any kind of evidence at all, we could make the sheriff come out. The state police do that kind of laboratory work, don't they? He was standing in the doorway of the bathroom, watching her as she examined the sink. Look how clean everything is. I tell you, we'd better talk to him. It's our only chance. She had stepped out of Norman's field of vision. She was looking into the shower stall now. He could hear the curtains swishing back. The little bitch, she was just like her sister, and she had to go into the shower. Well, let her. Let her and be damned. Not a sign. Norman wanted to laugh out loud. Of course there wasn't a sign. He waited for her to step out of the shower stall, but she didn't reappear. Instead, he heard a sudden thumping noise. What are you doing? It was the man who asked the question, but Norman echoed it. What was she doing? Just reaching around and back here, behind the stall. You never know. Sam. Look! I found something! She was standing in front of the mirror again, holding something in her hand. What was it? What had the little bitch found? Sam, it's an earring! One of Mary's earrings! Are you sure? No, it couldn't be the other earring. It couldn't be. Of course it's one of hers. I ought to know. I gave them to her myself for her birthday last year. There's a custom jeweler who runs a little hole-in-the-wall shop in Dallas. He specializes in making up individual pieces. Just one of a kind, you know. I had him do these for her. She thought it was a terrible extravagant of me, but she loved them. He was holding the earring under the light now, staring at it as she spoke. She must have knocked it off when she was taking her shower, and it fell over in the back of the stall. Unless something else happened. Sam, what's the matter? I'm afraid something did happen, Lila. Do you see this? Looks to me like dried blood. Oh, no! Yes, Lila, you were right. The bitch. They were all bitches. Listen to her now. Sam, we've got to get into the house. We've got to. It's a job for the sheriff. He wouldn't believe us even if we showed him this. He'd say she fell, plumped her head into the shower, something like that. Maybe she did. Do you really believe that, Sam? Do you? No, he sighed. I don't. But it still isn't proof that Bates had anything to do with whatever happened here. It's up to the sheriff to find out more. But he won't do anything. I know he won't. We'd have to have something that would really convince him. Something from the house. I know we could find something there. No, too dangerous. Then let's find Bates. Show this to him. Maybe we can make him talk. Yes, and maybe we can't. If he is involved, do you think he's just going to break down and confess? The smartest thing to do is go after the sheriff right now. What if Bates is suspicious? If he sees us leave, he might run away. He doesn't suspect us, Lila. But if you're worried, we can just put through a call. The phone is in the office. He'd hear us. Lila paused for a moment. Listen, Sam. Let me go after the sheriff. You stay here and talk to Bates. And accuse him? Certainly not. Just go in and talk to him while I leave. Tell him I'm running into town and go to the drugstore. Tell him anything, just so he doesn't get alarmed and stays put. No one can be sure of things. Well, give me the earrings, Sam. The voices faded because they were going back to the other rooms. The other, the other room. The voices faded, but the words remained. The man was standing there while she went and got the sheriff. That's the way it was going to be, and he couldn't stop her. If Mother was here, she'd stop her. She'd stop them both. But Mother wasn't here. She was locked up in the fruit cellar. Yes. And if that little bitch showed the sheriff the bloody earring, he'd come back and look for Mother. Even if he didn't find her in the cellar, he might get an idea. For 20 years now, he hadn't even dreamed the truth, but he might now. He might do the one thing Norman had always been afraid he'd do. He might find out what really happened the night Uncle Joe Considine died. There were more sounds coming from next door. Norman adjusted the license frame hastily. He reached for the bottle again. but there was no time to take another drink, but not now, because he could hear the door slam. They were coming out of number 6. She was going to the car, and he was walking in here. He turned to face the man, wondering what he was going to say. But even more, he was wondering what the sheriff would do. The sheriff didn't go up to Fairvale Cemetery and open Mother's grave. And when he opened it, when he saw the empty coffin, he'd know the real secret. He'd know that Mother was alive. There was a pounding in Norman's chest, a pounding that was drowned out by the first rumble of thunder as the man opened the door and came in. I know I technically could go further, but what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do what I said I was gonna do. I'm gonna save chapters 14 through 17, which will be the last 4 chapters of this book, for later. Because why not? Either way, that is going to be it for this book for the night. So we got 2 things I'm going to show you guys here. So first things first, the new books that I have gotten. I have gotten 2 books recently because I've been very interested in it. And well, one because I've been a fan of the anime series of this manga that that the anime series is based off of, and I wanted to see if there's any differences between this and the anime. But also on top of that, uh, I do have another book that I'm looking to read. Every novel of this timeline here. You guys will see what I mean when we get to it. But for now, let's reveal the first things here. So, the first thing I'm going to reveal here is, like I said, it's a manga. You may or may not have heard of the manga. You probably have heard of the anime, or you probably have heard of the manga but not the anime, or you may have heard of both, or neither. Either way, the first book that I've got, which actually came today, and the second book came yesterday, and I'm saving the second book because most people would probably know that franchise more than this one. The first book that I want to show off is this one. This is the first volume of Case Closed, aka Detective Conan in Japan. I have been a fan of this book, of the anime series, that I read the manga. Like I started out from the very beginning with the anime, back when it was on YouTube and YouTube didn't have the whole copyright thing that they have going on with it nowadays. The anime series of this manga was on YouTube for a good amount of years that I could remember. And even then, this, I love this series very much. I haven't watched any of the more recent stuff, but I'm pretty sure if I watched the manga, it would keep me up to speed. So every so often, I will buy this manga after every 4 books that I read after I read this book. So that way we have a bit more of a consistency going on here with that, and also because of the this going on back here. But it's always nice. I'll probably find another box to put this in, like put these anime series in, so that way I can, what I'm saying. But yeah. Anyway, and the second book I said has a novel timeline in in a world that's first book that the first movie of this franchise came out in 1977. The first book is this book is Star Wars: The High Republic Convergence. Why am I starting with this book? Well, the reason is actually very simple. Because there is a Star Wars novels timeline And this book, Off the High Republic, is the very first book in the novel timeline. And then, just like with Case Closed, I will be reading this book series every 4 books, just to make it work, if you guys get my drift. Now, as I mentioned, I am literally one part away from finishing off Psycho, so I'm going to reveal to you the 4 choices to replace that book after showing you the 2 new books that I just bought. Your choices are, and of course I will be making a community post about this. Your choices are Star Trek: The Next Generation, Q Space, the first book of the Q Space trilogy. This one titled, well, actually, it's the Q Continuum. This is the first book of the Q Continuum trilogy. This one titled Q Space by Greg Cox. There, your second choice is A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, also subtitled The Bad Beginning, which would be another case of the book where I will read it after. Well, I'll probably put the books in there because I already kind of got it lined up in a weird way, but either way, I got it figured out. But yeah, there's that. Then we have Fantastic Land by Mike Bachman, and then the book replacing uh, Psycho because it was the choice to read the second. Uh, it was the choice to read right behind Night Shift. This fourth book is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, the very first book in the Middle Earth series. This is basically the prequel to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So yeah, those are your 4 options. I'm curious to see what you guys will pick for that book for the next book to replace Psycho. But either way, that is all I have to say about that for the moment. Thank you guys so much for watching this live reading of Psycho, part 4, 5, something there. Either way, thank you for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this live reading stream. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, when I will be reading I'll do a poll on that too. If you guys want me to finish Psycho and then read Night Shift, or if you guys want me to read Night Shift and then finish Psycho on the next reading stream after that, I'll make a separate poll for that. So I got 2 community polls for you guys. But for now, uh, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Forrest Walpole, signing off.